All right, so when we look at the organ system, first thing we have to do is identify the types of muscles. We have skeletal muscle, cardiac, and smooth. Skeletal muscles that you will see is also called voluntary muscle. These are the muscles that we have control over. Like me holding this stick, my brain is sending neurotransmitting fibers, something, down to my hand, my arm to hold this stick. It's contracting my forearm so I have a grip in my hand. My brain is telling my body to do all this so I can hold this stick. All those neurons are firing down there, causing my muscles to contract to hold the stick. Those are skeletal muscles. I have control over that. The smooth muscle would be perhaps in your GI tract that you can't just say, I'm going to stop digesting this food. Right? I'm going to hang on to it a little bit longer. I'm going to stop digesting it. Or in your bronchioles, in your respiratory system, in your urinary system. We have control over part of our urinary system, right? Because we just don't all urinate all over the place. We have a little bit of muscle control. Maybe we'll talk about that later when we get to the urinary tract. But so we have smooth muscle or involuntary muscle. Then you have cardiac muscle that's in a group all by itself. It's heart muscle, myocardium. Myo meaning muscle, and then cardium, heart. So you have a cardiac muscle. We will spend an extraordinarily long amount of time talking about the heart and the lungs, respiratory system, cardiac and respiratory, because everything, all diabetes, hypertension, all that stuff, all these other medical emergencies that we'll be looking at affect the heart and lungs. So if you know the heart and lungs, you have a great deal of knowledge on how to figure other things out. Just like I said, attaches to bones, under conscious control, skeletal muscle. Smooth muscle we don't have control over. Blood vessels is another, contracting and expanding of the blood vessels. Vessel. Vasoconstriction, to constrict something means to make it smaller. Vasodilate, to make it bigger. Alright? So when you get scared, let's say, a car pulls out in front of you or something like that, the body vasoconstricts, raises the blood pressure, does all these things, raises the heart rate. It does it all on its own. It doesn't ask you to do that. The cool thing about when we look at cardiac muscle essentially operates independent from the brain. Because you can be brain dead. You can have zero things taking place up in your brain and your heart still beating away and be perfectly healthy, correct? So it relies a little bit on the brain to do certain functions that we'll speak of when we get into cardiac physiology. But for the most part, it does everything on its own. It's an amazing organ. It's one of my favorites. Maybe that's why we spend so much time on it. And smooth muscle, we already talked about that. So those are just terms for you. Now we sort of get more into the physiology. I should have explained this much earlier. What does physiology mean? When we say physiology, you might have an idea of what that means.
Study of the,
Huh?
study of the body.
Of what?
Systems.
Closer. Anatomy would be what?
Anatomy would be the study of the body.
Right? And then physiology, function of it. Correct. So anatomy, we study the pieces and parts. Physiology, we study the function, how it works. Right? The physiology of how the body works is amazing. We really shouldn't be alive. The body is so balanced, called homeostasis. Don't ask me to spell it. Homeo, then stasis. Google it. That auto spell thing will come up. Saves me every day. So homeostasis means balance. We always have to maintain homeostasis. If we get out of balance, the body gets out of balance one way or the other, bad things start to take place. If it gets too far out of balance, it stops. The body stops. The person dies. So, and there's a fine line. And we'll go through just a lot of information that you need to know about these balances and how to keep people in this homeostasis. Circulation now, however, is just movement of blood through the heart and vessels. When we say blood, when you see this term here, blood, you need to think a couple of things. You need to think pressure. All right? It provides pressure. And the second thing, oxygen. Those are the two main things this 6 weeks that we're going to look at that blood provides. Pressure and oxygen. And then it moves. There's other components of blood that we'll talk about. But for right now, we want to key in on oxygen. It delivers oxygen. And it creates a pressure, blood pressure in us, like a pressure in a tire. You have to have a certain amount of pressure in that tire in order for it to work. If you fall below that pressure, it just doesn't work. The body's the same way with blood pressure. So the circulatory system is part of this circulation. Circulation, circulatory system. What happens is here the heart, as we know, you can't be as old as you guys are and not know that the heart pumps blood throughout the body. There's approximately 6 liters of blood in the body, and the heart will pump all 6 liters, 5 to 6 liters, throughout the body in 1 minute. So you have full circulation of blood in 1 minute. A term that you don't need to be responsible for now, but that's called cardiac output. Cardiac, heart, output. How much does the heart output? And the standard cardiac output is 5 liters or so, ish. We'll just leave it at that for now. So it transports blood and oxygen to the cells. All the cells need oxygen. Right? You guys know that. You can't go seconds without, your brain can't go seconds without oxygen. Which in just a couple of seconds of someone taking the oxygen away from the brain, you become unconscious. Right? And it also removes waste products and it delivers other things. We have other things in the body that it delivers. The blood, the circulation is very important. That's how everything gets transported around. That Tylenol that you wish you had right now to cure that headache that you have, when you swallow that Tylenol, it takes about 20 to 30 minutes for it to digest, break up into the stomach. Once it breaks up, then it goes into the circulatory system, and then it starts finding those pain receptors that it's looking for. It's transported in the blood. All the medicine's transported in the circulatory system. Right? So you can really consider them sort of like pipes. But if you do that, consider them pipes that can expand and contract. They're flexible pipes. But they are pipes. That's why we have sort of the way that we think of the veins and the arteries. And then this is sort of just a broad picture of the circulatory system. When you see a picture like this, red tells you that that's an artery, and the blue tells you that that is a vein. So red for artery, blue for vein. When you see the sort of the big picture of the circulatory system. We won't memorize a lot of the vessels. We'll just memorize the vessels that are associated with pulse points in this class. We don't need to memorize all these vessels. No reason for that. But here are the definitions. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. The other definition that you need to know about artery is that not only does it carry blood away from the heart, but the other definition that it carries oxygenated blood. Now it doesn't have to have both of those together. Either it carries blood away from the heart or it carries oxygenated blood. Everybody good with that? Alright? Veins carry blood towards the heart, or typically carries deoxygenated blood, or low in oxygen. High in oxygen in arteries, high in pressure, low in pressure in the veins, carries deoxygenated blood. Arterioles are just the smaller arteries. As this artery branches out, it starts out big, like the aorta is the major artery in the body. All the other arteries branch off the aorta. And then they go from big to small to small to small to really small when they become arterioles. And then on the opposite side, small veins, the smallest veins are considered venules. Everybody good with those definitions? Any questions?
Is it true that something about the blood that the color is black inside? What's something like that?
Nah. Red.
Oh, it's red inside.
Yeah.
You serious?
Here's some major vessels. When you look through here, this is just giving you the size. This is what's called the femoral artery. When we get into the pulse points and everything, I'm going to have you guys find your own femoral artery. This is something we won't practice in class. This is something you will do at home. Because the pulse point of that, to find the femoral artery, this is the top of the leg, sort of the groin area. It's right in here where you would feel for the femoral artery. Any questions why we don't practice that in class? I just don't want phone calls from your parents saying, what are they doing? You know? But I've had doctors take students, high school students, their fingers and go, here, it's right here, feel right here, on a patient before. So you have to learn where the femoral artery is to feel that. It's one of the arteries they use a lot during the CPR. They feel, see if there's a pulse there.
Where is it?
It's just in the groin area, right here. This is sort of the top of the leg. It's right here, like your inner thigh, sort of in the midline. Not in the midline. It's more towards the lateral. No. It's towards the midline. It's medial. There you go. Throw one of those terms out. And then capillaries are the tiniest vessels in the body. This is where gas exchange takes place, which are the nutrients, the oxygen, the carbon dioxide will trade place. That process is called diffusion. And we'll talk a lot about that, how diffusion works and where they transport oxygen and carbon dioxide back and forth. These capillaries are very, very small. You have pulmonary capillaries. Pulmonary capillaries, like in a pulmonary capillary bed, a bunch of them together. They are 25 micrometers big. They're huge. 25 micro would be mu, right? With that long tail, probably not that long. Micrometers. What is that? Micro.
Smaller than 10 times smaller than millimeters.
To the negative what? 6? Right? Nano is 9. I don't know what 10 is. 10 to the negative 6 for micro, correct? Milli is 3. Millimeter is 10 times negative 3, correct? Micro will be 10. Anyway, it's 25 with 4 zeros. You have 6 significant figures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? It's that number there. That's how thin they are. They're very, very thin. Matter of fact, the red blood cells have to, in a pulmonary capillary, for oxygen exchange, they have to line up. If they try to go into the capillary together, they won't fit. That's how small it is. So all the red blood cells eventually have to line up and go through this capillary one at a time. There's some YouTube stuff out there showing that process. It's extraordinary to watch. Maybe we'll pick something up on it later.
You said they were called what? Mu or something like that? No, the...
Micrometers?
Yeah.
Mu. That's just the funny looking M for micro. What's in the blood is, one, it gives red blood cells. The composition, the main thing that we will talk about in the blood is the red blood cell. All right? It gets its color. It gets its color from the heme on there. Oh, let me use this. Been wanting to do this anyway. Oh, okay. So you have a red blood cell here, sort of a weird shape on that. And then in the middle of this is the hemoglobin. Heme gives its color a red. So hemoglobin, I guess if you want to spell globin, G-L-O-B, hemoglobin, the red blood cells will attach to this hemoglobin. There's so many red blood cells that will attach to each oxygen molecule. So many oxygen molecules will attach to the hemoglobin. Once it's fully saturated, then there's no more oxygen molecules that will fit on it. It's like a bus, except in India. Once you fill up all the seats, you can't get any more people on it, right? Here in the hemoglobin, once it's filled up, you can't force any more oxygen onto that hemoglobin. This is what hemoglobin carries the oxygen. It attaches to that. Oxygen has a great affinity to hemoglobin. What's affinity mean? Right. You may have a great affinity to your partner next door here, right? Or maybe not. So, an attraction, right? Affinity means attraction. The greater the affinity, the more that you are attracted to that. So, oxygen has a great affinity to hemoglobin. So that's one of the things that is transported, how oxygen is transported there. It carries oxygen on the hemoglobin, and it carries carbon dioxide away from the artery or the organs. So the process comes out is that the blood is transported through the arteries. Oxygenated blood is transported to the arteries. In the arteries, high in oxygen to the different tissues and the different organs. Once it gets there, all right, it goes through that capillary, and inside that capillary on one end is high in oxygen. The tissue is low in oxygen. It has a lot of carbon dioxide built up in it. And so gas will always move from a high concentration to a low concentration. So when we look at this, I wonder how I get a new one of these. Not like that. Know how to fix this. Okay, so when that artery is coming down here, and it's high in concentration, then it gets small and small and small, and it goes into the capillary right here. It has a lot of O2 in it. In this tissue right here has a lot of CO2 in it, carbon dioxide. It's higher in carbon dioxide in the tissue and low in carbon dioxide in that capillary. So the carbon dioxide is going to be transported there, and the oxygen is going to be transported there. We'll have a better example of this in a minute. But don't you love that drawing? So but you go through that and you get this diffusion. This is what this is called. Diffusion. It's a process of moving gas back and forth from a high concentration to a low concentration. And we'll talk about that more in the respiratory system. The other part here is blood composition, white blood cells. You have that in the bloodstream itself, that white blood cells help fight infection. Most time they go and they draw your lab and your white blood cells are above 10,000, they say, oh, you have some sort of infection. So white blood cells fight infection, produce antibodies. The liquid part of the blood is the plasma. And it's sort of, if you take the plasma out by itself, it's sort of a yellowish color. But plasma is the liquid part. And then the last part of the blood composition is the platelets. And this helps formation of clots. Like if you were bleeding, I cut myself shaving, my body will automatically send platelets up to that area to lay over that cut and start forming up a clot there. And then the body will start sending fibrogen up there to bond that together, essentially. Forming a scab, correct? So that's how the body helps control the bleeding through the platelets.